Director Tim Burton has established himself as a leading name in the worlds of visual storytelling and offbeat cinematic inventions, and for good reason. Though achieving a lifelong dream by beginning his professional career in the 1980s as an animator and concept artist for Disney on such films as The Fox and the Hound and The Black Cauldron, Burton's ambitions soon grew larger than the opportunities given to him, as his work very rarely saw the light of day in any of the finished projects he worked on. Realizing his art style barely suited what Disney was actually looking for, Burton began resorting to crafting stories of his own with the help of some of his Disney co-artists who decided to help bring his ideas to fruition. The most famous result of this was Vincent from 1982, a 6-minute short film made in a surreal stop-motion animation style in which Vincent, a young boy with an obsession with Edgar Allan Poe, imagines himself to be iconic horror actor Vincent Price as he dabbles in mad scientific experiments trying to turn his dog into an undead zombie, with Vincent Price himself even narrating over the film.
His thoughts, though, aren't only of ghoulish crime. He likes to paint and read to pass some of the time.
Just 2 years later, Burton would somewhat repeat the plot to Vincent with the Disney-produced live-action original Frankenweenie. After getting fired by Disney given the dark nature of his films, Burton's short projects would take the attention of high-profile figures in the worlds of Hollywood and entertainment alike, ultimately propelling his career with such films as Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, and then Batman in 1989, which brought the Caped Crusader back to his dark and brooding roots, to enormous financial and critical success, cementing Tim Burton as a household name. Since then, and to the present day, Burton's films would gain the reputation as some of the most eccentric and unique, with possibly the most famous example being Nightmare Before Christmas, which, while Burton was not the director but rather the producer and writer and core visionary, arguably comes the closest in illustrating Burton's art style in a compelling combination between the Christmas holiday and Halloween, through his signature stop-motion animation. Burton's films typically have a running theme in which the protagonist is an outcast from society, neglected by those around them and struggling to fit in due to their unusual nature. One key example of this, and the movie that may come closest to being Tim Burton's greatest film, is one that many have never even seen, let alone heard of before, and one that Burton himself has repeatedly gone on record saying that it was his favorite to direct: Ed Wood. Released in 1994 and shot in black and white, Ed Wood tells the real-life story of Edward D. Wood Jr., a struggling filmmaker trying to break into the film industry in post-World War II Hollywood. While seeking to get his foot in the door professionally, Ed seizes the opportunity upon hearing of a new film in development telling the story of Christine Jorgensen, the person behind the first publicized sex change. While initially getting rejected in his bid to become the director, Ed's morale receives a boost upon meeting his longtime idol Bela Lugosi unexpectedly while walking past a coffin store. Lugosi, famous for playing Dracula in Universal's 1931 adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel and one of the biggest horror film stars of the 30s and 40s, is in decline both in terms of his health and overall career by the 50s. With both Lugosi and Ed struggling to find work and achieve some type of greater relevance, the two strike a professional relationship as Lugosi ultimately becomes Ed's key big name in Hollywood backing him, leading to Ed finally securing the role of director over the sex change film which he titles Glen or Glenda, playing upon his secret transvestism that he hides from his girlfriend Dolores, and hastily casts Lugosi as a pivotal character in the film, automatically giving the project a degree of star power. Despite Glen or Glenda being met with fierce scorn by critics and seeing a disastrous release, Ed's newfound motivation as a director leads him to make Bride of the Monster 2 years later, despite difficult attempts to win over funding for the film, enlisting Lugosi as the mad scientist Dr. Vornov and Swedish professional wrestler Tor Johnson as his monstrous assistant Lobo, who are hell-bent on creating a powerful race of superhumans to conquer the world, as the plot of Bride of the Monster brilliantly illustrates. Following the film's shaky release, Ed's world turns to black when Lugosi abruptly passes away from years of morphine addiction, presenting a major and heartbreaking challenge that could potentially derail Ed's future aspirations in the film industry. Undeterred, and with a motley crew of misfits and other societal rejects supporting him in the form of the cast and crew, Ed sets out to make his largest project yet, Plan 9 from Outer Space, an ambitious sci-fi horror film concerning an alien race, with the core aim of resurrecting the Earth's dead and take over the world as a result, made with a small crew, stock music, extremely cheap sets, and all on a shoestring budget. After production on Plan 9 wraps, Ed sits back at the film's premiere and pledges,
"This is the one. This is the one I'll be remembered for."
The film is by far one of the most distinctive and realistic in Burton's filmography due to its gorgeous black and white look and astounding cinematography, beautifully mimicking the films of the time period, as well as those made by the real Ed Wood himself. As for accuracies, Ed Wood proves to be one of the most faithfully accurate biopics in cinema, as Burton painstakingly recreated the daily life of Ed Wood through Johnny Depp's memorable and very well executed portrayal of him, from his inclination to wear women's clothing as featured in several scenes to his over-the-top and hugely admirable drive to get his film projects made regardless of what stood in his way. Depp does a phenomenal job, imitating the real-life eccentricity of Ed Wood while also adding his own unique charm to the role as Depp typically does. One major accuracy is the precise manner in which Ed's films are made. Burton studied just about every detail of Ed Wood's filmmaking process, as well as the sets made for all three films, and incorporated such elements into Ed Wood, especially the cheesy and cliché mad scientist set for Bride of the Monster and the delightfully made cheap graveyard set made for Plan 9 from Outer Space, in which the gravestones are made out of cardboard. Such accuracies are so well constructed even right down to the iconic mistakes that the actors made on his sets. Take this scene for example. As Ed is directing Bride of the Monster, Lobo tries to walk through one of the doors made for the film but accidentally bumps into the doorframe because of his weight and clumsiness, shaking a huge part of the set in the process. Ed, just as he did in real life, never even bothered to do a second take, and instead went with it. A common trend of Ed Wood, as he would often shoot up to 30 scenes in an entire day, and would rush so quickly to the point hilarious mistakes and continuity errors could be found all across his films, with the microphone's shadow even overtaking the top of a cockpit set in Plan 9 from Outer Space, being one of the more notable examples. While the film does all it can to remain as faithful to the real-life story of Ed Wood and his films as possible, the film does take some liberties, mainly those surrounding Martin Landau's portrayal of Bela Lugosi. Firstly, as a major Bela Lugosi and classic monster movie fan as myself, Martin Landau did a phenomenal job as Lugosi to the point that he even won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor at the 1995 Oscars due to the role, and deservingly so. His accent and overall mannerisms masterfully depict the state that Lugosi was in well into the 50s, sadly struggling to survive and doing all he can to stay alive, as his glory days were behind him, only being remembered for his role as Dracula. Still, the film features Lugosi as one who constantly swears.
God damn, it's cold!
It'll warm up once you're in it.
Fuck you, you come out here!
Though hilarious, in real life, Lugosi avoided swearing and was far from the clumsy person that the film sometimes made him out to be, albeit for the purpose of winning over the audience out of sympathy. All in all though, Landau's Lugosi performance is simply exceptional and adds massively to the film's strengths, becoming one of the strongest biographical portrayals in film history. Perhaps the film's most interesting quality and greatest high point, however, is the fact that it was bold enough to tell the story of Ed Wood himself, a man with a notorious reputation in the universe of filmmaking. A reputation, however, that is just simply unfair. While describing the film, Burton has stated that he wanted to portray Wood in a lighthearted and sympathetic manner since throughout Wood's life and even after, Ed Wood has been grossly mocked and ridiculed, even being labeled the worst director of all time in 1980, just 2 years after his death. This label would stick to Wood's image for decades, allowing him to develop a cult following of fans after his death as his films gradually garnered the reputation as the worst films of all time, or the ultimate so bad they're good movies. And while the latter may hold some truth, one has to consider the circumstances that Ed Wood found himself in, both in the film as well as real life. Faced with an army of naysayers and people that tried to stand in his way, Wood stopped at nothing to bring his vision and ideas to the silver screen, regardless of what anyone had to say, with even extremely low budgets failing to hinder him in his efforts. Considering these factors, Ed Wood is by no means the worst director of all time. Nor are his films such as Plan 9 from Outer Space as bad as people say it is, the film that for decades has held the title as quite possibly the worst motion picture ever conceived. But this is simply untrue. Sure, continuity errors abound, special effects are wonderfully dubious due to the budget, and I have no idea what Tor Johnson is saying here.
Okay, Inspector. What are you going to do?
Look around a little.
But it is hugely entertaining and is a very fun watch, especially late at night when the nightly atmosphere sets in and the black and white cinematography overtakes your TV. The plot is outrageously fun and improbable, and the cemetery shots of Vampira advancing towards the camera and seeing the flying saucers fly over major cities is incredibly enjoyable. So it is far from the worst film ever made, and does warrant a watch based on its storied legacy alone. By showcasing Ed Wood in this light, Burton succeeded in telling a heartwarming and inspirational story illustrating that creativity and visions are worth fighting for, irrespective of the obstacles that present themselves to whoever fights for their own unique visions, making Ed Wood possibly Tim Burton's most personal and qualitative film to date, as Burton's own inner eccentricity complemented Wood as both directors brought their weird ideas to the forefront of the public's consciousness, although in varying degrees, especially when one considers the tumultuous start of Burton's career as a disgruntled Disney animator, who tirelessly tried to branch himself out and find his own footing, as Wood had tried to do many years before he did. For this reason, as well as the tightly written, effectively shot, and astoundingly well-acted nature of the film, Ed Wood just might be Burton's best film, even being the first movie of his that ever won 2 awards at the Academy Awards, one for Best Supporting Actor as mentioned, and one for Best Makeup. Ultimately, Ed Wood is a titan of biographical storytelling, as Tim Burton, barely a decade into his feature film directing career, managed to create one of the most awe-inspiring and inspirational films one can think of, in which the audience is taken on a journey where a filmmaker driven by intense ambition stops at nothing to bring his dreams to reality, despite the ridiculously handicapping odds against him, from the limitations of low budgets to a plethora of personal problems serving as obstacles to his work. All in all, the case of it being Burton's best is a very strong one, and does warrant a well-deserved watch.
That's a wrap.